The lights flicker overhead as Amy counts quarters and dimes for the third time at table 7 of Eddie's diner. Her hands tremble. The pile of coins won't cover her son's asthma medication. A crumpled eviction notice burns in her pocket. Outside, through the grimy window, a black SUV's headlights cut through the rain. The door opens, and a familiar silhouette steps out. Everything's about to change. Amy Martinez hadn't planned on spending her 32nd birthday working a double shift at Eddie's diner, but life had other plans. Between the breakfast rush and dinner service, she'd grab moments to study her nursing textbooks, highlighter caught between her teeth as she memorized medical terms. Her son Tommy's inhaler sat in her apron pocket, a constant reminder of why she pushed herself so hard. The morning regulars knew her story. 3 years ago, Tommy's father vanished after the asthma diagnosis, leaving Amy with mounting medical bills and a frightened 6-year-old who struggled to breathe. She'd sold her car, moved to a tiny apartment above the laundromat, and picked up every extra shift Eddie offered. The local pharmacy gave her a payment plan for Tommy's medications, but the monthly installments still stretched her budget to breaking point. Her uniform had seen better days. Amy had mastered the art of keeping the collar crisp and hiding the worn edges with careful ironing, but she couldn't hide the exhaustion in her eyes. The community college acceptance letter stayed pinned to her refrigerator, a reminder of the future she fought for with every coffee refill and burger order. Her nursing prerequisites would take 3 years at this rate, stealing hours between shifts and after Tommy fell asleep. The diner's regulars formed her unofficial support network. Old Mr. Peterson always requested her section, leaving generous tips when his Social Security check arrived. The morning coffee crowd slipped her their newspapers' coupon sections, and Ms. Ruby from the flower shop occasionally sent day-old bouquets to brighten Tommy's room when his breathing got bad. Amy kept a notebook under the counter, tracking every penny. Tips from the morning shift went to Tommy's medication. The afternoon rush paid for groceries and utilities. Night shift tips, when she could pick them up, went straight to her college fund mason jar. She'd mastered the art of stretching a dollar, buying marked-down groceries, mending instead of replacing, turning down the heat and wearing extra layers. The other waitresses offered to cover her shifts when Tommy had attacks, creating an unofficial sick day system that Eddie pretended not to notice. They shared their children's hand-me-downs and traded shifts so Amy could attend Tommy's school events. The diner became more than a workplace. It was the center of her survival strategy. But lately, the numbers refused to add up. Tommy's latest hospital visit wiped out her emergency fund. The college textbooks cost more than expected. Her landlord had started making noise about raising the rent. Each morning, she woke up calculating and recalculating, trying to squeeze blood from the financial stone. Amy kept her smile firmly in place as she worked the floor, but her coworkers noticed the increasing tension in her shoulders. She started taking home the diner's leftover soup, stopped buying anything but the absolute essentials, and picked up holiday shifts that kept her away from Tommy. The mason jar for college sat empty, sacrificed to keep Tommy's prescription filled. The diner's windows reflected her face as she worked, showing the dreams she put on hold and the determination that kept her going. Every table she cleared brought her a few cents closer to that nursing degree. Every tip moved her one step further from the edge. She refused to become another statistic, another single mom who couldn't make it work. Tommy deserved better, and Amy Martinez didn't know how to quit. The Thursday dinner rush hit Eddie's diner with unusual force. A corporate party of 12 executives filled the corner booth, their tailored suits and designer watches standing out against the worn vinyl seats. Their leader, a silver-haired man in a charcoal pinstripe suit, snapped his fingers for Amy's attention without looking up from his phone. Amy approached with her professional smile firmly in place, even as her feet ached from the double shift. The group's orders grew increasingly complex: gluten-free substitutions, specific temperatures for steaks, salad dressings on the side. She wrote everything down with methodical precision, knowing there was no room for error. The silver-haired man interrupted her repeatedly, changing his order 3 times and insisting their group receive priority service. Other customers watched uncomfortably as he complained about the water temperature, sent back perfectly cooked meals, and demanded to speak with the cook about the sauce preparation. In the kitchen, Eddie offered to take over the table, but Amy refused. She needed the tip from a party this size. Tommy's inhaler prescription was due for refill tomorrow. She maintained her composure through the endless demands, the subtle insults about the diner's decor, and the loud comments about simple people in places like this. The bill came to $447.83. Amy's hand trembled slightly as she placed the leather folder on the table, hope warring with experience. The silver-haired man barely glanced at it before sliding his platinum card inside. Amy processed the payment, her mind already calculating what percentage she might receive. The executives gathered their coats, their voices loud with alcohol and self-importance. Amy returned with the receipt and card, placing them carefully beside the man's empty wine glass. He scrawled his signature with a flourish, stood up, and walked away without a second glance. Amy's heart sank as she opened the leather folder. On the tip line, he'd written a large 0, adding a note, "Maybe better service next time." The other waitresses watched from the counter, recognizing the defeated slump of her shoulders. The table was a mess of scattered napkins, spilled wine, and deliberately overturned salt shakers. Tears threatened to fall as Amy began clearing the disaster they'd left behind. Her entire evening, nearly 3 hours of constant demands and subtle humiliation, had earned her nothing. The prescription would have to wait another day. She'd have to call Tommy's school nurse, explain the situation, and hope his backup inhaler would suffice. The regular customers in her section left larger tips than usual that night, having witnessed the entire scene. But their kindness, while touching, couldn't make up for the lost income from the executive party. Amy continued her shift, smile still in place, efficiently serving her remaining tables while fighting back exhaustion and disappointment. None of the diner's patrons noticed the muscular man in the baseball cap sitting quietly in booth 7, nursing a coffee and observing everything. None of them saw his massive hands clench into fists as the executives departed, or caught the determined set of his jaw as he watched Amy continue to work with unwavering professionalism. Dwayne Johnson pressed his coffee cup against his lips, using it to hide his growing anger at what he'd witnessed. The executive's behavior had struck a personal nerve, reminding him of moments from his own childhood when his mother worked multiple jobs to keep food on the table. He'd stopped at Eddie's diner for a quiet meal between meetings, but fate had other plans. Through the steam of his third coffee refill, he'd watched Amy's entire shift. Her quiet efficiency reminded him of his mother. The same determined set of her shoulders, the same careful way of stretching every dollar. He noticed how she'd slip her nursing textbook out during brief moments between tables, highlighting passages while waiting for orders to come up. The inhaler she kept checking in her apron pocket told another story, one that made his jaw clench. The diner's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows, but they couldn't dim Amy's professionalism. Even as the executive group had grown more demanding, she maintained her dignity. Dwayne had built his career on reading people, and everything about Amy's demeanor spoke of someone fighting against overwhelming odds. Between calls to his production team, he'd overheard fragments of conversations. The other waitresses called her Tommy's mom. Customers asked about her nursing classes. The cook mentioned something about medical bills. Each detail added to a picture that felt painfully familiar. His own mother had walked similar paths, worked similar shifts, endured similar indignities. The 0 on the tip line wasn't just an insult. It was the difference between medicine and suffering, between progress and stagnation. Dwayne remembered the times his family had faced similar calculations, the midnight mathematics of poverty where every penny mattered. His success had changed his life, but it hadn't erased those memories. He watched Amy maintain her composure as she cleared the table, her movements mechanical but dignified. The other customers' sympathetic glances and extra tips showed her place in this community. The diner wasn't just her workplace, it was her support system, her lifeline, her bridge to a better future. His security team waited outside in the black SUV, probably wondering why a simple dinner stop had stretched into hours. But Dwayne couldn't leave, not yet. He'd built his career on understanding moments, knowing when to step in, when to hold back, when to transform a situation. This wasn't about publicity or image. This was about something his mother had taught him long ago. True strength shows itself in how you treat others. The night crew started arriving, trading places with day shift workers. Amy stayed, picking up extra hours that would barely cover what she'd lost on the executive's table. Her textbook remained unopened now. Too busy, too tired, too defeated to study. But she kept moving, kept serving, kept fighting. Dwayne pulled out his phone, sending a quick text to his team. A few calls would set things in motion, but timing mattered. He'd learned long ago that how you helped someone was as important as the help itself. Amy's dignity deserved respect. This wasn't about a handout, it was about recognition, about acknowledging the quiet heroism of people who never quit. His mother would have understood Amy immediately, recognized the careful way she portioned sugar packets, noted the worn but immaculate uniform, saw the dreams beneath the exhaustion. In his mind, he could hear his mom's voice. Sometimes angels wear waitress uniforms, and sometimes they need angels too. The dinner crowd thinned out. Amy's steps had slowed, but her attention to her remaining customers never wavered. Dwayne Johnson, known worldwide as The Rock, sat quietly in his corner booth, planning his next move. He'd come to this diner by chance, but maybe it wasn't chance at all. Sometimes the universe put you exactly where you needed to be. Amy's shift ended at midnight. The fluorescent lights cast long shadows across the empty diner as she counted her tips at the counter. The total came to $43. Not enough for Tommy's prescription. Her fingers trembled as she typed out a text to her neighbor, asking if they could watch Tommy for an extra shift tomorrow. Dwayne Johnson stood up from his booth, removing his baseball cap. His movement caught Eddie's attention first. The old cook dropped the spatula he was cleaning, recognition dawning on his weathered face. Amy didn't notice, too absorbed in recounting her tips, hoping she'd made a mistake in the calculations. The sound of Dwayne's boots on the linoleum floor echoed in the quiet diner. He approached the counter with purposeful steps, years of knowing when and how to make an entrance guiding his movements. Amy looked up, customer service smile ready, then froze. The recognition hit her in waves. Confusion, disbelief, shock. Dwayne spoke first, his voice gentle despite his imposing presence. He asked about Tommy, about her nursing studies, about the dreams she carried alongside those serving trays. The dam broke. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was the kindness in his eyes that reminded her of her father, but Amy found herself telling him everything. The asthma diagnosis, the abandoned dreams, the daily calculations of which bill could wait another week. Eddie emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. The old cook had owned the diner for 30 years, seen 1,000 stories unfold across his tables. He added his own observations. How Amy never missed a shift, how she helped other waitresses with their tables even when exhausted, how she'd share her tips with the kitchen staff on tough days. Dwayne pulled out his phone, making a call that would change everything. His production company had been looking to fund community stories, he explained. They wanted to highlight everyday heroes, people who kept pushing forward despite impossible odds. Amy tried to protest, but Dwayne raised his hand. He'd watched her handle the executive group with grace and professionalism. That wasn't just good service. That was character. The night manager appeared with Amy's coat, insisting she sit down. Her legs felt weak as Dwayne outlined what would happen next. His team would cover Tommy's medical bills for the next year. A scholarship fund would be set up for her nursing studies. But more than that, they wanted to tell her story, to show others that dignity and determination deserved recognition. Amy's hands shook as she pulled Tommy's inhaler from her apron pocket. She tried to explain what this meant, but the words wouldn't come. Dwayne understood anyway. He told her about his own mother's struggles, the nights she'd worked multiple jobs, the sacrifices she'd made. Success meant nothing, he said, if you couldn't lift others up along the way. Eddie brought coffee for everyone, his movements deliberate as he processed what was happening in his diner. The old cook had seen Amy's daily battles, watched her fight for every inch of progress. Now he watched as hope returned to her eyes, as the weight of constant worry began to lift from her shoulders. Dwayne's security team entered quietly, carrying papers that would make everything official. But The Rock waved them off. Paperwork could wait until tomorrow. Tonight was about acknowledging someone who'd never quit, who'd kept her dignity when others tried to take it, who showed that true strength often came in unexpected forms. Amy finally found her voice, asking why her, why tonight? Dwayne smiled, the same smile that had lit up countless movie screens. Because sometimes the universe puts you exactly where you need to be, he said. Because everyone deserves a chance to make their dreams real. Because 9 years ago, he'd been in a diner just like this one, watching his own mother count tips and make the same calculations Amy had made tonight. The night wrapped around the diner like a blanket, holding this moment in its gentle darkness. Tomorrow would bring paperwork and details, news crews and changes. But tonight was about recognition, about seeing someone's quiet heroism and saying, I see you. I understand. You're not alone anymore. News travels fast in small towns. By sunrise, Amy's story had spread through the community like wildfire. The morning regulars at Eddie's Diner found camera crews setting up outside, their vans creating a makeshift media village in the parking lot. Inside, Amy moved between tables as she always had, but now her steps carried a lightness that hadn't been there before. The executive group's cruelty had transformed into an unexpected blessing. Dwayne Johnson's production team worked efficiently behind the scenes, setting up not just a scholarship fund for Amy's nursing studies, but creating a comprehensive support system. Tommy's medical care would be covered for the next year, removing the constant pressure of choosing between education and her son's health. The scholarship announcement came with an unexpected addition. Dwayne's team had contacted the local community college, establishing a fund for other working parents pursuing healthcare careers. Amy would be the first recipient, but not the last. Her struggle would become a bridge for others facing similar battles. Tommy noticed the change in his mother immediately. The constant tension in her shoulders had eased, and for the first time in years, she could truly focus on their bedtime stories instead of mentally calculating bills. His backup inhaler was replaced with a new one, and the worried calls to the school nurse became less frequent. The boy who had learned to be quiet about his breathing difficulties now spoke openly about wanting to become a doctor. Eddie's Diner transformed, too. The story attracted attention from local media, then national outlets. People came from neighboring towns, hoping to sit in the booth where The Rock had spent those crucial hours observing Amy. They left generous tips, having learned about the difference a single act of kindness could make. The other waitresses found their income increasing as the diner's popularity grew. But the real changes went deeper than money. The local business community, shamed by the executive's behavior and inspired by Dwayne's response, began examining their own practices. The pharmacy that had worked with Amy on payment plans for Tommy's medication announced a new program for families facing similar challenges. Other businesses followed suit, creating a network of support for working parents pursuing education. Amy's nursing professors noticed the change immediately. She no longer dozed during lectures, exhausted from double shifts. Her assignments arrived on time, her test scores improved, and her contributions to class discussions showed the practical wisdom gained from years of observing human nature across a diner counter. The other students learned from her experience, gaining insights into patient care that no textbook could provide. The silver-haired executive's $0 tip had unintended consequences. His company, faced with public backlash after the story went viral, implemented mandatory sensitivity training for all employees. They established a scholarship fund of their own, specifically targeting service industry workers pursuing higher education. Sometimes the worst in human nature brings out the best in others. Dwayne Johnson's production team documented everything, not for publicity, but to show how a single moment of recognition could cascade into lasting change. They captured Tommy's first doctor's appointment without financial stress, Amy's proud walk across campus between classes, and the quiet moments at Eddie's Diner where she still worked weekends. Not from necessity now, but from choice and loyalty. The diner's regulars watched Amy's transformation with pride. Old Mr. Peterson still requested her section, but now their conversations centered on her studies instead of her struggles. Ms. Ruby from the flower shop started offering internships to nursing students, creating a bridge between medical theory and practical patient care. The morning coffee crowd expanded to include other working parents inspired to pursue their own dreams. Eddie himself became an unexpected catalyst for change. The old cook started a mentorship program, partnering with a community college to offer flexible jobs to students in healthcare programs. His diner became more than a restaurant. It evolved into a symbol of possibility, a place where dreams could take root and grow. Amy's story appeared in local papers, then national media. But the headlines missed the subtle transformations, the quiet ways her life had shifted. She could now attend Tommy's school events without calculating lost tips. She could study without the weight of constant financial pressure. She could finally breathe, just like her son with his new inhaler. The production team's documentation captured these moments. Amy helping another waitress apply for college, Tommy proudly showing his improved breathing tests to his doctors, the community college announcing expanded programs for working parents. Each ripple created new possibilities, turning one act of kindness into a wave of positive change. 1,300 words cannot fully capture transformation. It happens in small moments, a mother reading without worry, a child breathing easily, a student understanding complex medical terms that once seemed impossible. Amy's story didn't end with Dwayne Johnson's intervention. It began there, spreading outward like rings in water, touching lives far beyond that midnight moment in a small-town diner. 1 year later, Amy walked through the halls of Memorial Hospital for her nursing clinical rotation. Her crisp blue scrubs marked her as a student, but her confident stride showed someone who understood healthcare from both sides of the clipboard. The same patients that had served her well at Eddie's Diner now help her connect with patients, turning medical procedures into moments of human connection. Tommy's health had stabilized with consistent medication and care. His school pictures showed a different child, shoulders straight, smile wide, no longer trying to hide his breathing difficulties. He'd started a support group for other kids with asthma, sharing his story and helping them understand they weren't alone. The inhaler in his pocket was no longer a source of shame but a reminder that challenges could be overcome. Eddie's Diner had evolved while keeping its heart. A wall near the entrance now displayed photos of scholarship recipients. Amy's picture at the center, surrounded by other service industry workers pursuing healthcare careers. The scholarship program, initially funded by Dwayne Johnson's team, had taken on a life of its own. Local businesses contributed regularly, understanding that investing in education meant investing in their community's future. Amy still worked Sunday breakfast shifts at the diner. Not from necessity anymore, but to stay connected to the place and people who had supported her through the hardest times. She mentored new waitresses, helping them navigate work-study balance and sharing information about educational opportunities. The diner had become an unofficial community center, where dreams were shared alongside coffee and toast. The silver-haired executives' company had undergone its own transformation. Their corporate culture program, born from the viral story of that $0 tip, now required all management trainees to work in service positions. Understanding grew from experience, creating leaders who recognized the dignity in all work. Dwayne Johnson's production company released a documentary about Amy's story, but focused less on the celebrity involvement and more on the community's response. It showed how a single act of recognition could spark lasting change, how kindness could transform not just one life but an entire community's perspective. 1 year had transformed more than just Amy's circumstances. It had shown that success wasn't just about individual achievement. It was about creating paths for others to follow. The regular customers who had witnessed her struggles now watched with pride as she balanced clinical rotations with parenthood, her story inspiring others to pursue their own dreams. Amy stood at the nurses' station of Memorial Hospital's pediatric ward, reviewing patient charts as the morning sun painted the corridors in soft light. A young mother approached the desk, anxiety clear in her tight shoulders and worried eyes. Her child needed an inhaler, but insurance complications had left them in limbo. Amy recognized that look. She'd worn it herself not so long ago. Without hesitation, Amy reached for her phone, connecting the mother with the support network that had grown from her own story. One call to Eddie's Diner set things in motion. The scholarship wall there didn't just display success stories. It housed a community ready to help others rise. By afternoon, the child had their medication, and another family learned they weren't alone in their struggles. The next Sunday, Amy's regular booth at Eddie's Diner filled with nursing students, sharing coffee and study guides. Tommy sat with them, confidently explaining asthma management to a newly diagnosed child. Through the window, the morning sun caught the brass nameplate on the booth, where kindness serves hope. Installed the day Dwayne Johnson's quiet observations changed everything. A $0 tip had tried to diminish her dignity. Instead, it sparked a wave of compassion that transformed countless lives. Sometimes the greatest strength shows itself not in grand gestures, but in the quiet determination to keep serving, keep studying, keep believing. Amy had learned that kindness, like healing, worked best when passed forward.